It certainly has been a atypical year, hasn't it? We've had all of our meetings Zoomed or some form of, we've had Ring Central, we've had, depending on what various users wanted to use. Have you all seen SMPTE's new logo?
Yes.
If you've seen the journal or you've been on the SMPTE.org website, you've seen the, it's basically your old-fashioned iris, but with different colors around it. Not sure what was behind that, but I think they just thought it was time for a change, something different for the 21st century. I was kind of partial to the old one myself, but I don't like change. So I kind of felt the same way when they changed it from the original one. Well, tonight's meeting is on streaming for video engineers, as many of you read in the bulletin we sent out. Should be a very interesting meeting because we have a couple of very interesting presenters. Bob Lamm, who I've known for a million years. You're still running Sync Corp, Bob?
No.
Okay, well, some of you remember Sync Corp, doing all kinds of nonlinear editing stuff in the very early days.
Yeah.
You were kind of a real pioneer.
Yeah, there was a strong competitor called the Camera Company making my life miserable.
That's true. Right now, Bob is actually assisting MIT Sloan Management School with streaming, and he's probably learned as much as information he's given out, because it's an interesting place. He's also formerly worked with Belmont Media and Boston Neighborhood Network. Matt McMakin is with 1623 Studios up in Cape Ann, and I've done some work with them too. Very great people, and he's also a consultant in the Boston area on video technologies, and they're your presenters tonight. Needless to say, the industry has been completely transformed by the pandemic, and it kind of gave a real push and shove to streaming technology, which is kind of going crazy right now, with Zoom being the leader perhaps, but everybody is kind of getting into it now. And it'll probably be around a lot longer, I hope, than the pandemic. I'd like to just tell you a little bit about what we have coming up. We have an interesting meeting coming up in November with Hitachi as the presenter, John Humphrey, on ST2110, SMPTE ST2110, all about IP packetized transport of the various aspects of video. Some of you may be more familiar with the previous ST2022, which basically took SDI and just packetized it and sent it all as one signal. So if you had to do anything with that part of it, you had to break it up. But with ST2110, you've got all the separate parts of the video being sent separately, and all timed by a master clock, essentially. But they'll be getting into that in some detail in the next meeting. That will be on November 18th. That's a Wednesday evening. And in December, we're having a meeting on what is essentially film scoring for the gaming and esports industry. That's something we've never touched on before. And that should be pretty interesting. The speaker is McLean Deemer. So there'll be more on that and everything going out on the email. So with that, I am going to turn this all over to Bob Lamm. Bob, it's all yours.
Hey, thank you. Send me the write-ups for those things and I'll post them on the website.
I certainly will. I think the Hitachi one has gone out to you.
Yeah. For you guys, can you mute your microphones? I can hear other stuff, and it switches the pictures and stuff like that. All right. So can I move these titles? Well, in any case, here you can see the first page. We're trying to sort of discuss this as streaming for people with a video background. Matt, do you want to discuss these that you're showing right now, or?
Yeah, you're seeing the first slide of the slideshow, right?
No, I'm seeing the slides of all the presentation you guys have made. 1623 Studios.
Oh. Let me straighten that out, hopefully.
There we go.
There
Now
we
it's back. All right. Can you go one slide further?
Sure.
Or can I, actually, is the question.
No, I can give you remote control, but
Okay, well, in any case, this slide here shows that this is not a new industry. This is an existing industry that's been around a while. And the very first companies that were in it were, for example, Skype, which dates from 2003, GoToMeeting, which is a conferencing application that many of you guys may have seen, which dates from 2004, and Facebook Messenger, which is an application that almost everybody has because Facebook has been around for a long time. They didn't all start doing the same thing, but they are gradually converging to the same thing. So for example, Skype, which originally just started out that you can talk to people outside in your family, like in another country, now has a video capability, and you can talk to more than one person at a time, and that kind of stuff. And so the industry has a couple of has some ancestors. Can we go to the next one? Okay, I just want to sort of set some terminology so we're all a little bit on the same page. If you look on the left-hand side, I've written point-to-point, and you can see in there the very first one is Skype. Is probably a point-to-point system that you're familiar with. Basically, people just talk to each other on a video phone on your laptop or on your cell phone, one-to-one. Since it started, they have added the ability to have more than one person, and they've added video capability, but that's how it started. But point-to-point is a modality for streaming that a lot of broadcasters are used to because we've been using it for remote feeds. Who's got the mic on? Hold on, let me see. In any case, you can see it on the night the NPR news that they do where they have Brooks and Shields come on. You can sort of see that Skype puts a little watermark on the picture. And Skype has made a big effort to appeal to broadcasters because they offer a higher quality version that is less susceptible to breakups and higher quality and all the other kind of stuff that television people care about. The next session, the version that I was going to discuss, that these systems get put in, is what we call enterprise, which is instead of just buying some streaming software, instead streaming capability is built into a whole suite of products like Microsoft Office. So Microsoft Teams is the Microsoft version of this, and Google has its version of streaming that is in their package. They have various strengths and weaknesses that Matt is going to discuss shortly. But in the meantime, I just want to say that these are meant to be bought as something that the entire company buys. And so there's some communication between maybe the people who are on the networks in the main office and ability people who are in the field, like the salesmen. But the big thing is that they're expecting you to buy the Microsoft solution or the Google solution, and they're not very friendly to people who aren't part of the company or don't happen to have that version, that word processing version, that kind of stuff. And then there's another version that I guess we're calling one-to-many, which is it's a streaming package, but the streaming package is designed to work with independent applications that may not be from Microsoft or from Google or that kind of stuff. And the best example of that is maybe Zoom. Hello? Yeah. Is maybe Zoom. And you can use that with all of these things. But it's more complicated because since since let's say Zoom doesn't really make the word processing software or the PowerPoint or anything like that, you sort of have to use the application a little bit independently of the streaming package in order to get it to work. So it's maybe a little bit more difficult than these enterprise versions, which is just very easy to to switch it back and forth between, let's say, PowerPoint and Office and all this other kind of stuff. So those are the three main configurations, you could say. And then there's another configuration I would call hybrid, which, Matt, can you go down one?
Well, first we're gonna, we just.
Okay, that's the
little
picture of the
diagram.
point-to-point. So this is showing you guys supposedly talking to each other, let's say on Skype. Can you go to the next one? This is an example of sort of like an enterprise system. The people on the left are the people on the computer network in the main office, and the people on the right are the people out in the field. And the only thing that's really connecting them is they're all connected to the internet. But it's basically a group of people that all have the same applications, and they can call the streaming capability from the different applications directly. Matt, can you go one more?
Yep.
Okay, and then here's the one-to-many, which perhaps not so dramatically doesn't show, but basically a person can sit there and demonstrate a lot of things here from the main office, and the people on the right hand can sort of follow him and maybe even participate. So for example, if he's showing a PowerPoint, they can maybe adjust the PowerPoint while they're talking to the guy. Or if he's showing an Excel file, they can sit there and they can type variables into the Excel file too, and see how that affects the results of the Excel document, that kind of stuff. So I sort of tried to document there a little bit, or we tried to document a little bit there, the three architectures to talk about. Matt, can you go down one more?
Sure.
Okay, and then there is the question that aside from these three basic configurations, there are also what we call hybrid systems, which are systems that are more than just software, but are also assisted in some way. A good example of that is, for example, Skype. You can buy a version of Skype that is hardware assisted to, as I mentioned, have better quality by having a higher priority on the network for transmitting and that kind of stuff. And a lot of video people use it. And then if we can go one further.
Well, just to also say, the hybrid is that instead of working from one Zoom client to another Zoom client, so you're staying within the infrastructure of the product you're using, one of the hybrids we're talking about here is the same model of one-to-many, but we're using sort of what they're almost calling them utilities now, things like Facebook, YouTube, Twitch.
Yeah, that's the next slide.
Well, the next slide is one-to-many even more so.
Yes.
Where you're doing the same thing, but you're using a service provider like Restream or a switchboard to duplicate that stream. So you're not having to do that within your organization. You're not having to manage multiple streams off to multiple companies. You have one stream going to say Switchboard Live, and there you can choose, okay, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook Live, so you can appear on all of those platforms.
Yeah, the main point I was sort of trying to make is that you have the point-to-point, you have the enterprise, you have the one-to-many, and then you can provide hardware assistance to make them a little bit more powerful or efficient. Because in their very basic configurations, all these computers have connections with each other individually. And the bigger the network gets, it's sort of like airline maps. They get very, very dense. But if you can sit there and you can add some hardware to duplicate functionality, and for example, let's say send all the video along one connection to a particular point, and then to make all the various copies that go to everyone, there is that capability. And so this is what this slide is showing, and it's showing that you can duplicate all these things at various stages. So the stage where you see the restream and the switchboard coming in, or perhaps you can broadcast to Facebook and then use Facebook to reach all of your audience, that kind of stuff. So there are a lot of capabilities in all of this streaming stuff to address very large numbers of people, even if the connection you're using to your personal laptop may not have that much particular capability. So that's really what we were trying to say is these three basic configurations, and then assistance can make it more powerful.
Yep, there's hardware, and then there's these software providers that you can just connect to them online, you pay your monthly fee. So you're shifting the complexity of setting up one to lots of different services to somebody else, and that can be very convenient.
Okay, can you skip it one more? Okay, oh, then this is all the reason why you should be more enthused about streaming than you probably are. An important factor is that you're no longer limited to your market area. You really can talk to people. All they really need to be hooked up to the internet. They can be all over the world. At the same time, people can originate content for you. So for example, the person who's in India can sit there and he can show his PowerPoint to show how the market in India happens to be doing, that kind of stuff. So you can have people from all parts of the world to contribute their little parts of the presentation in, and it's a fundamental capability of streaming. The other thing is that there are some capabilities that I think it's just more convenient. For example, you can send an email to the people and they automatically join the conference. There isn't this whole business of, you know, calling them and say, please turn on to channel such and such of the satellite, that kind of stuff. All of this coordination and organizing is just built into this much more. Can you go one slide further?
I just wanted to say too that the line between the presenter and the viewer has been substantially reduced as well, because now you can have people in India who are just viewers can ask a question to the person that's presenting from London.
Okay, then there are particular features that people like about streaming that I just sort of want to mention because they're common across all the products. One of the things is that people can participate more. They're not just a viewer, but they're a person who can contribute to the presentation. They can show their version of the file that they want to discuss, that kind of stuff. Almost all of these systems have independent chat channels. So a person who is watching can chat with another person who is watching and ask him a question, like, what is this guy talking about? Hopefully there's not too much chatting going on right now. You can share these documents so multiple people can sit there and they can sort of like, you know, try different numbers out in the spreadsheets, or they can mark up the PowerPoint independently and stuff like that. That does have its disadvantages. You can really screw each other up if two of you guys are working on a PowerPoint or a spreadsheet and you're overwriting each other's work. Another feature that surprised me a lot is these breakout rooms feature, which is, I think, I associate it with Zoom, but it is ability that all the people who are part of the conference can sort of go into independent groups which are all listening to each other and discuss things independently. So for example, a person can get onto the conference and can be discussing, this is our sales plan, this is what we're going to do. Let's all break out into our breakout rooms, and the individual sales managers for the individual territories will tell you a little bit what we have in mind for that particular territory. Now, I'm discussing this like it was a company that was discussing sales. Most of my observation of this has been in classes, in universities. I find that the professors really like the idea, discuss among yourselves. Okay, let's go to the next slide, Lou. Okay, other features that are useful, that are common to these tools. For example, we are recording this particular meeting in the cloud with Zoom. And then these recordings are basically immediately available to everyone who's a participant, and they can copy it and whatever. You don't have to like record it on your local Kypro or anything like that, and then arrange to make to distribute the file over the internet or anything like that. It's already in the cloud. I've already mentioned screen sharing. That is I think a great feature because multiple people can discuss a document and they can even mark it up. So you can sit there and you can mark in yellow, this is the particular point I want to make and stuff like that. You can share the files obviously, and you can each make a copy of it, for example. It'll record into the cloud. And nice things about a lot of these applications, like for example Zoom is available for Windows, Microsoft the Apple, Linux, a couple of different operating systems, including cell phones. And so you don't have the big problem that we used to have with worrying about the platform we're running it on, although there's still a little bit of that. Go ahead a little further, please.
I just wanted to chime in there that the screen sharing, these products, many of these products fold two products into one. So GoToMeeting, LogMeIn is the company that owns GoToMeeting, and they sell a desktop sharing, desktop remote control product. And one of the things that I found in the last 8 months is, while training people to use Zoom and using Zoom for our purposes, I use Zoom for remote control almost every day to walk people through either showing them my screen or directly connecting to their computer and controlling their computer. And that's been a real powerful, and it's a real plus. So you're not just getting video through this, you're also allowing to monitor, to control, to help people fix problems with their computers.
Okay, so now it's my turn to be the interrupter.
Okay.
So these
All
are
right.
all the different applications, and they're by no means complete. For example, you will not see vMix on this list. But let me let Matt discuss some of these applications with a little bit more details.
Okay, so the first one is Skype, and it's pretty much the first one out there that I've experienced and heard about. It was founded in 2003 for people to make internet phone calls. Became hugely popular to get around nationalized phone companies that would charge amazingly expensive to call between people. It became very popular around the world. 2005, they introduced video capability. In 2011, they allowed, we mentioned earlier that Skype is primarily a point-to-point tool, but it does have the ability to do sort of one-to-many or a group-to-a-group. You can now do up to 50 users. It's widely used and it's very straightforward to operate. When we were choosing how we were going to move forward back in March, we tried many things and settled on Skype first and Zoom second because we were a little concerned about the complexity of Zoom, but we moved to Zoom pretty fast. But a lot of people are familiar with Skype and it's easy to use, and that was a big, powerful thing for it. Long history providing TV remote feeds, as Bob mentioned earlier. It's Skype TX, and there's a lot of hardware, not a lot of hardware, there's people who make hardware that facilitate that, which is very handy. And Skype is available and has been available across a lot of different platforms, so people can contribute from their iPhone, from Linux systems, and there was even for a while there was directly built into televisions. One of the things that's also very powerful about Skype is most of the other programs you have to use email or some way to distribute the finished file at the end. And one of the interesting things is the Skype function of the texting function, the chat function of Skype allows you to move files, and you can move the recorded file that you just made. And we were doing that quite a lot at the beginning. It's made it very easy for someone to record it, and one of their contacts would be the people who are going to edit it. Right-click it, you send it to them, and they've got it. One of the problems, the downsides were, it's not terribly reliable. We had a lot of problems with people connecting or being disconnected.
You might want to advance the slide.
Oh, I'm still talking about Skype.
Okay.
Okay, am I talking too much about Skype?
No, I'm just thinking that the downsides may be on the next slide. Never mind.
I don't have a downside here, and so and the other thing is that Skype is a Microsoft product, and a lot of times in organizations, Skype is implemented by the IT department, and we ran into IT blocking Skype. All right, on to the next one. Microsoft Teams, as Bob mentioned earlier, it's closely tied to the Microsoft suite of products. It's more of a suite of products that has video collaboration built into it, and it's very nice to be able to talk with a video screen right over as you're editing a Word document and getting it out the door. Some of the drawbacks is it's closely tied to Microsoft's suite of products. So if you wanted to use Apple Pages for word processing, it just doesn't really lend itself to that. And it's not really intended to just say, hey, you know, we want to communicate, just download this program and let's connect. It's not the way Teams is set up. You really need to be part of the team, part of an account. It's a pay thing. They also don't have any way of, earlier in the slideshow, we saw one-to-many utilizing Facebook and YouTube. The Microsoft Teams does not make that available to you yet. So that's Microsoft's way. And then there's Google's way, Google Meets. And just like the Teams, it's tightly integrated with Google's products. And one of the very powerful features it has, I'm not that familiar with Teams, to be honest, but you can, from an email, from a document, you can just immediately open up a video chat and sort of work on it, communicate about it. And it's very nice for sharing between people that are in the G Suite team. The drawbacks, just like with the Microsoft, it's intended for use with G Suite, and it's difficult to use it outside of that. And the base plan can't record. You have to pay to record any of the programming. Well, most of the other products allow you to record right off the bat. You can only participate if you're using a Gmail account. That's how it makes its connections. And invitation and doc sharing not as advanced as Teams and Zooms. I find that the way that you invite other people, it was kind of clunky. We explored Meets early on, and in the early days, that is in March, Google was still making it a pay product, and I'm sure it's going to go back to being a pay product. So that's another thing that you might want to consider. And we had a lot of trouble with AV sync in Meets. I was talking to a Google rep just a month or so ago, and they're working on it, but at the moment, we had a lot of drifting. And then Zoom, as the current market leader, and it certainly has become in the last 8 months, popular and familiar to just about everybody. It's almost a meme now. It's almost the Kleenex of this group of products. It functions from the browser and its well-designed app very smoothly. So if you want to invite somebody in, they can just do it right through their browser. Many of them can do this, but Zoom does it better. And their app is really well developed. That's their desktop app and their mobile device app. It can break out into meetings, and you can delegate hosts. So I could hand this over to, I'm the host of this meeting, I originated it, but I could hand it over to Bob and leave, and it would just keep going. It's a very nice feature. Oh, we're still getting some more people coming in.
Yeah, I recognize some of them. Hi, David. Hi, Paul.
And they were the first to sort of originate the waiting room, and again, gives you fine control of the attendees, and that's also a plus and a kind of down. If we could ask the people to mute their microphones who just joined, thank you. And you can control who's coming in. You can turn off and on their video, their cameras. You can chat with them directly. That makes it controlling a large group of people much easier. And as I think it's on Windows, it's on Mac OS, iOS, Android, Chrome, Linux, a lot of different platforms. I just one of the drawbacks has been the company's poor communication about security of the platform. They do offer encryption, but they constantly, I think most of it has been the sort of media latching on to the problems of privacy and how secure is this communication, very important to particularly corporations and government. But they have been dealing with that, and they do offer end-to-end encryption now. And of course, even when they started offering that, bad communication from the president of the company has caused a lot of confusion there. Another drawback is the document collaboration is outside of Zoom's control. With Teams and Meets, it's the document collaboration, the sharing of documents. You can open and look at the files and do the way we're doing it, but it's not like you can pass it around within that package and control editing and versioning of whatever you're working on. And another kind of drawback to it is the breadth of features can be overwhelming. If you look at the web version, when you log into your web version of this, it's page after page after page of options, which is great when you can put them to use, but it's a little bewildering to people who just needed to open up a video channel with each other. Zoom has spent a lot of time, is spending a lot of time making their API available, and they're working with lots of other companies to make connections to other products, make Zoom easier to use. For instance, we now have a lot of our members making their own shows, and they're independently doing it on Zoom. And we added to our website the ability to have an appointment with us to help them use Zoom or help them use the episode submission process. And they can just go on there and find a time and click on it and reserve it. And I get an email and an invitation to a Zoom meeting, which automatically starts up at the time that we both are going to be there. And I can help them. I can do remote control. I can do all those things. So it's lots of very useful features, and they're working very hard at making more. And then there's GoToMeeting, which is a pioneering conference meeting software, and it was probably the industry leader until 2020. Zoom has certainly usurped that position. The product has the ability to they've made versions of it that are nicely tailored for other purposes. Like I was saying, training, helping people use the computers. They actually have a focused version called GoToMeeting, GoToTrain, I think is what they call it. They have a very nice console, a way to organize meetings and people, sort of a different sort of model than Zoom's waiting room, but it's very nice. And they're very straightforward about their security and encryption. Some of the drawbacks is if you're trying to bring someone in from a browser, you're not asking them to add software to their computer. They only support Chrome and Edge, which has been a problem for when I've tried to use the product. I don't want to install their software because once you install it, I found that the free version gives you a lot of pop-ups and asking you about your opinions of this and that, and I found that very disruptive, annoying. Let's see, and then WebEx, which is Cisco's product. Positive functions from a browser and a well-designed app, like many of the others. It incorporates existing Cisco and Polycom infrastructures, so it's used extensively in the corporate world, and they make very well-developed boardroom-like systems that you can just step in and make video calls or have video meetings. So if you're looking for that level of infrastructure, it's an economical. It has a lot of features, and you can pay by the month. One of the things that's happened with Zoom recently is that when we started doing this, you could pay by the month, and now they want to charge you by the year to sign up. And they have a long history of professional hardware built out. That's the sort of Cisco and Polycom. There's a lot of integrators that have built rooms to use WebEx with. It's not so popular among the general population, so they don't know about it as much. And there's a little confusion between the different levels of their product. And then there's Facebook Rooms, which
Can
is—
I just say one word about Cisco or WebEx?
Sure.
The fact that it comes from Cisco is very reassuring to IT people, because Cisco is a real pioneer of internet communication. And a lot of the role of the engineer is declining a little bit, because now we have to deal with the IT coordinator of the facility, and they're usually in charge of the IT. They're not going to give that to the video engineer. So that if the video engineer wants to talk the IT person into using some of these systems and opening up the network of the facility, WebEx is a good way to do it because the IT person still sort of has a different take on putting software on computers and opening the firewalls to the facility, because they're thinking that their job is fundamentally to keep the payroll safe, to keep the confidential documents, to have the email be safe. So if your IT people aren't very, very happy with the idea of using video applications on all of the computers, bringing up the Cisco version is something they are at least willing to entertain.
Something they recognize, yeah. Okay, Facebook Rooms has a highly developed contact infrastructure. So if you're already using in your organization Facebook to a large degree, it allows you to add video. I just want to make this distinct. This is not Facebook Live. This is Facebook Rooms, and it's part of their Messenger application. So it's slightly different. Now, it's very new. I've used it some. I find it's more of at the moment, a kind of a toyish like thing to just sort of, everybody kind of hangs out. Some of the big drawbacks of it is the participation requires a Facebook membership. You can't just send out an invitation like you can with Facebook Live. If you set up a Facebook Live meeting, you don't have to be a member, you don't have to be a contact, you can just follow a link. It's newest to the game. Facebook is often blocked within corporate environments, making Messenger difficult to get running. And participants were mercilessly advertised to, if they break this, if they start using this product, just like any other Facebook product, because it's Facebook. And, it's, you are, like they say, Facebook, you are the product. So you're sort of, if you use this product, at least at the moment, you're opening up your communication, their communication to Facebook's interest. Well, most of these other products, they're relatively private. Okay.
Yeah, in Belmont, we used to get a lot of pop-up menus when we tried Facebook.
And so issues to watch out for, as Bob was talking before about getting along with IT, because all these products essentially work off of desktop computers or black boxes that are really network connected. You can certainly get pieces that work into the kind of video infrastructure, but it's usually that kind of hybrid. So one of the things is to negotiate and confirm your bandwidth capacity before you try setting up a meeting or anything else. You want to make sure there's sufficient bandwidth along the entire route. Bottlenecks will make for a stuttery video, and worst of all, it'll make the audio stutter, which is the most critical part of it, of course, as we all know. And also you want to confirm that there are no IT rules that will block your application. A lot of these applications use slightly different or specialized connections of internet protocols that IT departments often just lock down. So you want to definitely rehearse the setup ahead of time, make sure that the network traffic will pass, communicate with the IT people, make sure that that works. And you also want to schedule to avoid other, talk to IT. Are you doing this at a time of day where this might cause problems for them sending, the jobs to the printer or doing payroll or something like that? And I found that it's true of Zoom. I try and get people to, when we do Zoom, to try and do it sort of early-ish in the morning before California comes online. And then we find late-ish in the afternoon. Not sure if it's people getting home and starting Netflix, but that's causing quality problems in the transmission. If you're using a wireless device, so if you're joining through Wi-Fi or using a device that's strictly for passing video, such as let's see, trying to think of something that uses a cell modem. You want to, what I always do is I go to the location first and test it out back to the studio, make sure that we can get a decent signal. And also as part of that, I do a dry run to confirm that I have all the necessary password and software drivers are installed, whether you're working with your own equipment or with somebody else's equipment. I've many times have sort of ended up struggling with resetting something or resetting a key with Facebook. And so it's great to just get that all set up first. And if it's done from a smartphone or a computer, like we're doing right now, it's a good idea to make sure that you quit all other applications so they're not eating up resources and potentially making the system unstable. And that might interrupt with tones or notifications, which one of our members shows. The person, the interviewee, had left their iPhone right under their laptop, and every few minutes we hear the new text message bing, which was unfortunate. And Big Iron, I don't know, Bob, if you wanted to take over here again, or would it?
Well, so far what we've been talking about is stuff running on smartphones and laptops, but it is possible to bring systems into the corporate environment, you could say the enterprise environment, that can give you more capability. And I've listed some of the options there. For example, running on Linux-based systems. There are separate encoders that you can buy. You can do things that will add things like closed captions. You can do things that will do things like just to make the ads louder, or the non-ads quieter. So that it's possibly, if you get some of these other systems like we were discussing before, that you can add capability that will add information. And that's kind of the stuff that broadcasters are sort of sometimes interested in doing. It's also possible to build a complete little portable system to take it out on location, like broadcasters are used to doing. And now that much of the pieces can now be portable, like you can buy a whole vMix switcher just on a laptop. It is more realistic for you guys to stream directly from your portable system to your laptop, which then communicates to your studio, that kind of stuff. Can you go to the next one?
And just I wanted to add, in some of the so-called Big Iron, if they're using wireless systems, they almost all use cellular modems, and some of the more higher end equipment, you can bond modems. You can have multiple cellular modems running at the same time to increase the likelihood of the signal getting across smoothly.
Yeah, we had bad luck with modems ourselves. The main reason being just that the areas we wanted to broadcast from just had poor phone service. And the other problem is that we wanted to broadcast from stadiums that had games, high school games. And everyone pulls out their camera to take a picture of the goal.
And they send it off to
If they needed
Facebook.
the signal to be reliable, the signal would go away. So be careful.
And with multiple modems, you can also choose different carriers. That's one of the things we found where I am on Cape Ann, is that in some areas there's better coverage from Verizon, other areas it's better with AT&T. So I would have different SIM cards for different situations, and hopefully they both work and they can bounce across them. But if they don't, you can have a carrier that's more reliable in that area.
So this next slide is sort of based a little bit from my experience. Most of you guys remember the old Where's Boston show there used to be downtown and in the Prudential, which basically consisted of a whole bunch of slide projectors running in synchronization with some audio tapes that it would just play a show over and over again. And the systems that control those shows are Crestron and AMX. And they were originally designed just so that a person in a remote control room could raise and lower the curtains, could bring the shades down, could bring the curtains, make the curtains separate, turn on projectors and pick the inputs and that kind of stuff. And those systems have grown. So those systems have grown that they will turn the projectors on and off and stuff like that. And the way that they physically work is they sell you all these interfaces that basically are right next to the gadget that you want to control and plug into whatever the remote control input is. And you buy the interfaces along with the central computer. The only problem is that you have to buy the proper interfaces for the particular devices that you want to control, and then you have to program them. You have to write a little bit of programming. And this is usually done for each particular room by a programmer who's familiar with their language. So it's a little bit more trouble if you want to sort of add streaming to a facility like that that has been built that doesn't really have the proper capabilities you really need for streaming. What you need for streaming is just a little bit more ability to change the monitors, for example. Certainly also a little bit to adjust the audio a little bit more easily. For example, the kind of monitor you might like is a monitor that faces the presenter, so he can see all the people who are listening over the internet and can see if they're raising their hands to ask a question or that kind of stuff. So if you, but these systems are very, very widespread. And so if you have these systems, have someone come in like Marty, and they're going to have to sort of look a little bit about what functionality you guys are going to want and that are going to have to be reprogrammed in. And then these programmers are not that common. You know, they're busy. So I wrote in here, don't expect a discount. Okay, what's the next slide have to say?
It's a continuation of Crestron and AMX.
Here, basically what I already said, which is like, this is an old-fashioned technology, but it is very, very, which was originally not designed with streaming in mind. It was designed with slide projector, codec graphics projectors in mind. And so, you know, you're going to have to redo your stuff a little bit if you want a smooth streaming experience. In the past, their idea of a streaming experience was to put a camera in the back of the auditorium and stream that one signal out. Now with Zoom, you're talking about software that's capable of choosing which camera is on, letting you choose a particular participant who gets to speak and ask a question, that other kind of stuff. What does the next slide have to say? Oh, practical issues. Well, just speaking personally from the things that I've done, you really have to take the user into account, although they're changing. At MIT, where they had financial professors, you know, talk about particular things, it was very important that they were comfortable with changing their slides, showing what they want to do, that kind of stuff. And in Belmont, where we used to have people show their scientific experiments over the internet, it really was helpful that we could show their Google Hangouts video, because they were used to generating those. They were used to sort of sending them to like trade shows and stuff like that. So they could give you a very good demonstration of how their electronic microscope worked, because they already knew where the controls were and stuff like that. So when we were in Belmont, to be perfectly honest, we would choose what we would stream with based on what the presenter was comfortable with. Hold on, someone's asking a question.
Yes, there's a lot of great questions actually, but we can address some of those, and some great comments too. I think we should address those after the slideshow's finished. But yeah, keep them coming. There's some really great.
Yeah, I see. There's a whole
tips
list of chat things that we should go over, because I've been watching them as they go by. It's just that it's sort of covered. But in any case, an important factor is a little bit, what are the people already used to? If the person is used to sort of the Microsoft Teams experience, it might not be such a bad idea for you to be compatible with that and just automatically be able to trade documents with him and you guys to see each other, what you guys are doing. What does the next one have to say? Oh, a big problem with these streaming things, particularly if you're doing them in an auditorium partially, is that sound is a really important issue. You can sort of get away with stuttery video, especially since a lot of the videos really consist of, you know, PowerPoint slides. It really isn't noticeable if it's stuttery or not, but the audio has to be good. So I would have to say that wireless microphones are very, very, very handy for the presenters, so they can walk around the room. There are these various desktop microphones like you see in the middle that you can, you know, the people can sort of press a button and talk and then let go of the button and it silences. There's this audio mixer that Marty encouraged me to use once, this Shure SCMA20, and it automatically equalizes the loudness of all of the different people in the room, and it's very good at eliminating feedback. I hate to give Marty an ad, but it was a very nice machine, and so I mentioned it in here just because I liked it. It is important to get good sound, and particularly if you have a lot of people who are not just each individually in front of a laptop like Zoom expects. You're going to have to sort of deal to get good sound. But this is something video engineers are very, very used to. This is finally an area where the video engineers can go in with confidence, thinking, "I am going to provide value." You know, what does the next one have to say? Oh, the last word. Something we've already mentioned before, which is that audio is very important. So be very careful that you're getting good audio. You can get away with a little bit of choppy video, but good audio is very necessary. And personally, I think that a lot of times you're better off just showing the presenter's PowerPoint than showing them, except maybe at the beginning of the show, just so you can see what they look like, and at the end of the show where they look thankful that you listened. And the other thing that I should mention is it's very, very easy, particularly if you're using these Crestron setups, is to make the system you're using too complicated. But the problem is that you as the engineer are unlikely to be the operator of the system day after day after day. There is going to be people who come in to, like in a hotel room where they sponsor a different conference every 2-3 days. They'll bring their audio guy or whatever, and he's going to be just superficially familiar with your system. And it's going to have to be something that you can explain to them very quickly, because if you make it complicated, it's going to make it hard for them. And the problem with these live streaming presentations is if it crashes or it doesn't work for some reason, people will know right away. I can't tell you how worried I was about this before me and Matt started this. Some of you guys tuned in early and discovered that we were already on the air because we wanted to make sure that you were able to get through. And Paul will tell you that we tested out the PDF document, that you could download it and stuff like that, because it gave us a little bit of problems getting the link right. The problems weren't rocket science, but they were just like making sure the link is properly spelled. If you're copying links from one document to another, that the link information that is if the link is clicked on is actually carried over in the copy and paste operation, that kind of stuff. I think this is the last one. What's the next one have to say?
Yeah, the last one has something very simple to say. So I'm looking at the group chat, and there's a lot of great points, and I'm going to fold those into we'll upload an updated version of this slideshow, and we'll bring those in and have some of the links. There's some really good points made about what about Slack? I didn't mention that as a product, but yep, that's another sort of enterprise level video tool. But I also tips like checking which services allow participants to use the most common open ports. And my experience has been Zoom is pretty good about that, as well as Skype. So I'll the suggested products too, I'll bring those and add them in. And you also can read and follow up with some of the problems other people have had with certain kind of equipment. I see Avery is mentioning a lot of things about some of their experiences with some of the things we touched upon, port issues, bonded modems. And then also I see Stu Lipoff in Las Vegas talking about time-based correctors. Well, these systems, the systems at least we're talking about, record to files. And what you'll find in those files, if you haven't looked at them closely, is they relatively conform to a frame rate. And sometimes you have to deal with that in post. The files themselves generally play back pretty well. But if you're going to prepare them for a system to play it back, you really need to run it through something like Premiere or Resolve and lock that frame rate in to prevent the drift from happening. Early on in our experience, Premiere earlier in the year, or last year too, had a lot of trouble if it wasn't a rock solid frame rate and a rock solid audio linkage there. We'd see all sorts of audio drifting, and there were all sorts of little tweaks that I'd learned to do to get them to sync back up again. But I found that they've definitely they've recognized this, and we have made well over 300 programs since March using Zoom, Skype, and then editing it on Premiere. And we've had pretty solid audio sync. Now, that being said, is that we're talking about mostly sort of software-based tools that do all the digitization and the audio monitoring themselves, pass it into the internet, and then receive it on the other side. There's a whole lot of equipment that there were some more slides, but we just found that it was too much. We're not sure exactly what people wanted to know, but there's definitely equipment that works over video over IP that does make sure that it's a rock solid sync. And if there's problems, can use other paths through the internet to make up for that. And so what you get what you feed into it is a solid SDI signal, and what you get out on the other side of the internet is a solid SDI signal. But I'll definitely put in a lot of I'll put these comments in and add them to the end of the to the notes slideshow. Okay.
Hey, David. Somebody here is asking in the chat if we can put pictures of ourselves up.
Pictures instead of having a video feed of ourselves?
I don't know. Let me read this more carefully. Oh, well, actually, there's a whole bunch of comments. Should you end screen share so we can see the presenters?
Yep, I just turned off the screen share so we can all see each other.
Hello, David Acker. We used to work together.
Hello, how are you?
Hey, Dave. Did we answer all your questions?
Or please ask questions.
Yeah.
We can
Very
feed you with.
very interesting presentation.
Oh, I'm glad you liked it. The main thing I've sort of learned from this experience of playing with all the streaming stuff is that you're much more dependent on the IT guy. I mean, it used to be the broadcaster, all he had to worry about is what is the resistance of the wave, of the air to the broadcast wave. And now we have all of this equipment between us and the other person, including routers and switches and God knows what else. So.
Yeah, I found that, I was talking today about connecting one of the municipalities in Cape Ann to the 1623 studios. And, more and more the networks are being made available. Either it's a VPN network where the traffic is much less complex, or it can be sort of reserved for what's going on between the two ends. And that can solve a lot of the problems and make for a more reliable connection. And again, the IT department is right there in the middle of that. So I think one of the reasons why we say we work with the IT department, because they're sort of the gatekeepers to a lot of this.
Yeah, but the capabilities are definitely there. I remember when I was at BPIX, we did the Swedish Football League. And we had remote controlled switchers at each of their stadiums all over the country. And then they would stream the video to the main office in Stockholm, and they recorded it there. And it was it impressed even the IT people.
On the Olympics, their IT system is very advanced. NBC, I work freelance for NBC, the NBC side of it. But the OBS kind of controls the overall IP infrastructure. It's hardwired in, it's all fiber throughout the entire system back to the IBC. Unfortunately, Tokyo got canceled. I'm hoping to get back to Tokyo 2021. But everything from our standpoint is basically IP controlled. So from the video signals getting back to the only real kind of traditional broadcast infrastructure that we have is at the immediate, production, like our couple of cameras and our audio mixer, and that's it. And even from that standpoint, The audio mixer, you know, the talent production mixers are direct mic to IP that go back to the IBC for production, or go back to London, or go back to Stanford.
Yep, that's what we're working on too, is bringing the switchers into the studio itself, both for COVID purposes, so we can be completely isolated from the other side, because some of the municipalities want to have people on site having a meeting together, but we're going to have the PTZ camera control and the switcher control and audio control 15 miles away in our studio, where we can really control the environment and keep us safe, but also so we don't have to ask people to tromp out in the evening to something that's 15 miles away from home and come back. And some of those meetings seem to run to 11 or 12 o'clock.
Is there any talk about standardization with IP streams? Because there's a lot of different models out there for video streaming, as far as like getting back to a single switcher. Like, say somebody wants to be on a TVU, or somebody wants to be on Zoom, or somebody wants to be on Slack, and you need to cut them all through a single switcher. Is there any talk about standardization between that?
Not that I've come across. Not that I've heard about. Is that they're all sort of, I mean, it would be nice if there was a SDI 12 gigabit standard that everyone could use, but I haven't seen that. And I don't know if that's because of competition and they just don't want to they want to protect their product and their product's use, or is it that so many of the things that we've talked about and the uses that we've talked about is encrypted, and it's sort of business information passing forth. While what you've been talking about, like at the Olympics, I mean, I'm sure that it's on a VPN, so it is encrypted, but that media is open to be used by the whole organization. It's all useful content to be used in the production at NBC. So that's what it is. But if you're working in Tesla headquarters and you're on Slack or you're on Microsoft Teams, you sure the heck don't want anyone else to be in on that. One of the things that we had some problem with Zoom early on is that they would repeatedly, they still do this, upgrade the product. Yes. And they would lock out. We had a whole series of USB or Thunderbolt connected converters, and they would just become unusable. And you'd fight with them, and you'd go onto the lists and read about this. They'd just wipe out a lot of equipment, and they'd bring it back in. But their thinking is they don't want some other, because this is computer based, at least what we're talking about, they don't want some other application or malicious application on the computer to be able to intercept anything that's going on. So there's always that battle between the product that you're using, Zoom, Skype, and everything else on the computer. And of course, Avery, in your situation, it's a great situation where it's direct IP to IP video equipment, not underneath its computers. And it's one of my big complaints over many years is that so much of these black boxes for playback of video, for streaming a video, is a Windows box underneath, and it's a bane of my existence, keeping track of the versions. I think last Tuesday or the Tuesday before, I religiously upgrade, patch, backup, upgrade, and I think that there were
Windows 10 had a lovely
87 critical patches in 1 month. So you can see where the companies like Zoom, Teams, Google Meets, they're very worried about what the other things on the computer are doing.
Right.
Yeah, I also think that the technology isn't really set yet. For example, I look at the bird dog cameras, and they use NDI, and NDI does provide some features that did not exist before that, before that format became popular. For example, like DTZ control, sending intercom on the line, that kind of stuff. So some of this stuff is just you know, using a new signal format that perhaps is more advantageous, but it's not what you're used to using. I look at the vMix switcher that I have, and it has a lot of capability for generating all sorts of different types of signals. And it confuses me immensely. All the different types of signals that I can choose and data rates and stuff like that.
Right.
I think this is going to settle into a couple of popular ones that people will end up sort of standardizing on, but it's going to take a while.
And I think there's also going to be silos of standardization too, because early on I tried to train some of the people, trying to get them to use OBS Studio, which is like vMix. It's a software-based mixer, switcher, but it was not designed by video people. It just is. It's not intuitive to like vMix would be, and I had a lot of trouble with that. But for the people that use it, mostly gamers, people on Twitch, it works just fine, and they're not interested in video switchers. They're interested in their particular way of video production. And so there's certainly, there might be that, that bifurcation of within the industry where they just can't, they don't need to agree. They just don't agree because they just don't need that kind of control room. The person directing the show, because they're just sitting there at their computer and they're bringing in a video game or they're bringing in documents that are being shared.
Oh, someone is asking if we're going to share the recording and the slides. The slides are already up. If you go to our webpage, you'll sort of see them mentioned in 2 pages on the webpage. And we will share a link to the recording once we make sure it plays and we post it.
We'll post it on YouTube.
Yeah, but
It'll be on YouTube.
But there'll be a link for it. There'll be a link for it on our webpage, and it's our intention to just record all of these meetings if we can, and put them on YouTube with a link for the particular one on the webpage that goes to it.
And don't look for that PDF for a little while, because I'm gonna add a lot of your questions, notes, and some of the companies that are mentioned to those notes. So download it maybe a day or 2 from now if you're interested.
All right.
Any other questions or comments or personal experiences that would help anybody else?
I just might mention, I know you mentioned OBS Studio. There are a couple others that are similar. There's ManyCam, SparkoCam, and that sort of thing. And they're really nice if you're doing something locally with a bunch of different cameras, because they also allow you to, in addition to rapidly switching between different camera views, you can also pull up still slides and that sort of thing. But one capability they have is they also have the ability to take remote IP streams from remote cameras. And one of the nicest ones to use are some of the apps that are on the cell phones. There's something called IP Cam that you stick on a cell phone. And, the cell phones have really high quality, high resolution cameras. They generate a video stream that either locally or remotely you can bring into OBS Studio or SparkoCam or ManyCam, and you can switch that in and out, and you can just do a lot of back-end production without it physically being in the same place where the camera is. So it's worth looking at that stuff.
It's a very good point, because OBS, again, it was not really created by video people. And so a lot of the features that perhaps video people wouldn't think of are being added quickly by multiple people, such as NDI support, such as IP Cam support. And it's open source. I believe it's all open source, but it's freeware. And a lot of other companies are matching into them and making added capabilities onto OBS. And some of the other products that you mentioned, Stu, yeah, I was going to include in this, but it just it became a little too focused. There's a lot of other ways. There's vMixes, an OBS that's made for the iPad, and it's specifically designed so the remote cameras are iPhones. And there's a built-in media store, a built-in titler, all on the iPad. You can just bring it up and push it out. And then there's even some companies who are talking about IP video feeds like Restream, where the mixing is done online. So the video is coming in sort of just as a vanilla video off of a client on a computer or an IP source to a web service provider that assembles that into a software-based mixing situation. And you can make a show from there and broadcast on to multiple platforms. So you just need to set up your web camera or an IP camera and point it at the right place. And then somebody logs into an interface and mixes a show. So there's no computer. I mean, of course you have a computer, but there's not tuned computers. There's not software that you have to keep up to date, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I also might mention that like OBS Studio, which is freeware, there are plugins that are made by third parties that are free as well, but they turn it into a virtual webcam. So for example, on the Skype call, I could be on OBS Studio feeding a virtual webcam, and I could then feed all my content, audio and video and multimedia, whatever, through OBS Studio, and it'll end up showing up on Zoom. So they also is a third-party application called Virtual Audio Cable that'll pipe the output of that back into what the computer sees as an input. So with cobbling together a few disparate things, you can create professional quality switching and production on your desktop with no investment in any money. And if you use a cell phone as a camera, you actually end up having a pretty decent camera.
Yep.
Plus, some of these remote security cameras where you can remotely pan, scan, and zoom will also create IP feeds that can be ingested into OBS Studio. And I use that to open up one computer where I can remotely control, pan, and scan, and another one where I'm ingesting the IP feed and then rebroadcasting it. And it's a $100 device that I can situate somewhere on a wireless on a Wi-Fi network, and I can control it and also switch it in and out.
And sort of the inverse of that, I'm not sure how well it works with OBS, but with vMix, because you're using computer infrastructure, it's a standardized hardware across lots of industries. So you can purchase a bus adapter that's Thunderbolt connected, and you can drop in an SDI capture card, so you can get 4 feeds of 3G SDI directly into the computer that you're switching and mixing with from a media store and all sorts of other things. So you can go from these great little guerrilla kits with just an iPhone or $100 security camera all the way up to something that's pretty darn broadcast quality.
Yeah, I personally like the vMix application. I've used it in a couple of different ways. Like I use it with SDI with the Madrill adapters, and I've used it with IP video with like Axis cameras, with PTZ cameras. And we used it in a way so that we could aim the cameras at the different members of the selectments committee and get nice shots of the people just as they would talk. So all of these software-based solutions are really revolutionizing this business tremendously.
And this is the sort of production side of the software. And then they just link. There's just a pull-down menu. You paste in your Facebook account stream key and a link to the Facebook's API. You push the software button, and it's live on Facebook. It's live on YouTube or one of these rebroadcasting streams. So you're sort of getting a sort of hybrid both in the production end and the hybrid in the distribution end. So it's all been very interesting to try and find a way. Like I said, I've used these products to some degree, but it became critical for the organization to be able to use these. So there's a lot of there's parts of it, again with the IT department, there's parts of this that you don't even see, and that's file sharing and how do you get files from editors to other editors? How do you get them from the members? Remote control of equipment to just keep the IT systems going. So it's really interesting how these products have really opened up the ability. I mean, I go into work, but for many months, I set all this. We weren't allowed to go into work for the first 3 or 4 months, and so we were able to set this up entirely remotely. It's a good thing that we just moved into a new location. It's a good thing that I had set up some of these remote desktop remote control software that allowed us to get this stuff going. Any other questions or comments?
Has anyone seen those tiny Blackmagic switchers, some of which can be seen as a webcam on your computer?
Yes.
Or be independent switchers. They have HDMI inputs.
There's a bunch of them now. Again, for the gaming world, there's I can't remember their names, but there's several little HDMI based products, and then Shogun. What is the company's name? It's not Shogun. The products are Shogun, Ninja,
Atomos.
Atmos. Yep. They did a firmware upgrade on one of their products that gave it, not just the ability to record multiple streams, but to give you a switching capability in that product, along with automatically generating an edit decision list that can then be read by other applications. So the output of all those recordings from the discrete channels that just assemble themselves into a rough edit once you get back to the studio. So there's more and more of this stuff appearing and being built into these products. So they're all computers. They're all, everything we're talking about, whether it's so-called Big Iron or Zoom, it's all running on some kind of computer.
So there's hardly any real hardware anymore.
Well, it's little it's some piece of
Hardware
hardware,
running software.
right? Hardware that hooks up to Thunderbolt, USB 3, or drops into a slot into a PC.
I mean, our biggest streaming client prior to the pandemic was Golden Boy Boxing. After HBO dropped them, they signed a contract with TVU, or not TVU, LiveU. And LiveU, so basically we provided the full production facility. They did their show. They dropped it to LiveU, and LiveU dropped it to Facebook Live, where they did a pay-per-view.
Yeah, there's another interesting model, pay-per-view. You can monetize these meetings. You can monetize these meetings, or you can collect data with polling and other kinds of things on how this is working out. That linkage to computers provides so many wild options, capabilities.
Yeah, we used to have a slide in the presentation, which was my fantasy, which was sort of like, colleges don't have to have campuses anymore. They don't have to have dorms. They don't have to have lecture halls or things like that. Colleges, all they need is to stream their classes, and they can still charge tuition. And I was thinking, this is a tremendous business for educational institutions.
I think one of the more interesting things is the whole human factors aspect of it. The video conferencing and remote conferencing has been around for a very, very long time, but it never really got any traction. But now we have this kind of enforced 6, 8 month kind of lockdown where people are beginning to use it and get familiar with it. When I was living down in the Fort Lauderdale area, back in 1969, I was taking classes at the University of Florida in Gainesville via remote video. They had a system there called Genesis. It was a byproduct of the space program where, they were trying to educate engineers all up and down the Florida coast. But I mean, it dates back that far in terms of doing this stuff. And now because of the convergence of gaming and remote conferencing and corporate meetings and a remote broadcast, all of a sudden this technology is building on each other and making it less expensive, more widely available, and on cheaper platforms.
Yeah, the state of Massachusetts used an educational TV service that was in Cambridgeport, not Cambridgeport, in like near Leechmere. And I remember they used to broadcast from the Pru on microwave to all the schools, and it was just such a hassle for them to play these programs to the kids. But they used to do it in the 70s and in the 80s.
Yeah, instructional service TV, I think was the name they gave it.
I remember MSET.
That's it, yeah.
MSET, yeah.
The main thing I remember about them is that they, before one of the shows, a guy tried to update the browser and he put out and he crashed their character generator. And for a couple of days, they had no graphics.
Yeah, we have all the schools here in Las Vegas now have gone to 100% virtual. And the biggest problem was getting the kids equipped with computers. Google was providing them with Chromebooks, but a lot of them didn't have Wi-Fi coverage. But the issue now is that they've got capabilities. They have the computer capabilities, but they don't have the bandwidth. The systems get so heavily loaded in the afternoon with people watching Netflix and people working at home and corporate stuff and the peer-to-peer gaming that you can't maintain a decent connection to the classrooms. So, the cable modem infrastructure was never really designed to have that sort of simultaneous traffic on their system.
And where would we be if this pandemic had happened 5 years ago? With no Amazon, we're not developed with groceries and these abilities to stream like we do.
I think I've got a couple of my daughter's friends that work for Microsoft 365, which is based at a lot of them are based out of Massachusetts. And prior to the pandemic, they had to drive into work, which is ironic that their remote software suite they had to physically show up to. But due to the pandemic, obviously, this has really pushed a lot of companies into realizing that they can get the same quality of work out of their employees. They don't have to pay for the commute time. They don't have to pay, the higher cost of living. And, for people that aren't like me, where I physically have to be on site, it's totally changed the work world.
Yeah. The dream is, for at least for us, is that we could send out a box that they would just plug in, attach to their Wi-Fi or plug into an Ethernet port, and we'd become immediately aware of it and have control of it, and have a telepresence for them, because that's and maybe we don't have to be there anymore. They have a piece of hardware that does it, and we can be at home.
I know our company's had a lot of discussion over how we move forward in the future, because the remote sports and remote broadcast industry has been kind of eaten alive over the last 10 years because of the lowering cost of bandwidth and streaming and all this stuff. So it's really a question of, if you want the same quality of production, how do you get that while lowering travel costs and lowering on-site number of on-site personnel. And it's been a huge discussion. SVG sports video group, has talked a lot about it. And it's, you know, a lot of the bigger players, Level 3 and the Switch, and I'm missing a name of one of the other ones that we deal with a lot. But, you know, they've been talking about, like, how do we basically create, you know, a pseudo remote package that eliminates, you know, the majority of travel. So, you know, we might have a couple camera guys on site and maybe a audio technician and a service engineer, and that's about it. And everything else is done, you know, from 9 to 5ers at a studio, where you can do 2 or 3 shows per an 8-hour shift. So you're, you know, reducing costs, reducing travel costs, reducing personnel costs, and kind of how do you do that and still preserve the quality of production?
There's this basic issue with corporate meetings and stuff over this, that people can talk to each other, they can share slides, but you still don't build the same sort of relationships you do when people are together in the room. And I remember back in the 60s, Deck World was operating in Boston, and they did a demo that I think finally showed to me that the technology really still wasn't up yet to what you wanted to do. They had a room on the exhibit floor where they took I think a 8-foot conference table, they sawed it in half. They had the other side in San Francisco, and the halves were up against a full-size video wall that were the length of the conference table, with high quality, high resolution, multiple cameras and audio that were in there. And you could walk in the room in San Francisco, you could walk in the one in Boston, and you swear you were sitting across the table from the person who was at the other end. But that required facilities that we just don't routinely have available today. So I think we're moving towards that, but to have some real telepresence and to have the ability to actually interact with people as though we're physically in the same room, you need to have 3D sound, you need to have much higher resolution, you have to reduce the delays, you know, associated with the compression and decompression, and you know, we're not really there yet.
Yeah, our biggest issue is, you know, even under the best of circumstances, we have roughly a 30 millisecond delay between, you know, our local production facility and the remote production facility, whether it be Fox or CBS or NBC, you know, so the camera, you know, the localized camera operators have a delay speaking to the director and producer. That's really our biggest issue at the moment, is kind of that, you know, you got a couple of frames of delay in between there, which is enough to, hey, you know what, that ball's already gotten there.
Yeah, and if it's not propagation delay, if you're operating the other end of the country, it's processing delay for the compression and decompression. So,
right,
and interleaving. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we had the bandwidth to, you know, have a fully uncompressed TVU system on both sides, then it wouldn't be a big issue. But, you know, you're talking 40 gigs worth of pipe at that point, which is unrealistic.
For the smaller scale projections, 5G is going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Both in the giving us the bandwidth to, you know, the bonded modem business was to try and get for 1080p, like maybe two megabits, hopefully. So that's going to, I'm kind of really interested to see not only can we do what we do now better, but what kind of thing are we going to be able to do with that much more bandwidth everywhere?
Yeah, the 5G standard not only has higher just raw bit rates, but built into the standard is the ability to trade interleaver depth for error rate. So you can basically reduce the latency if you're willing to tolerate some higher errors, and that's adjustable. You have the knobs within 5G to do that.
You're muted, Marty.
Should be
There you
on now. Anyone else?
Well, did we cover what you wanted us to?
Yeah.
So we'll give us a little while, but we'll post it, and you guys can watch it again, and we'll put an updated version of the PDF up too.
You may want to work toward a follow-up to this, maybe several months down the road, or even a year down the road, because things are moving pretty quickly.
Yeah, we've been thinking about it. We've been thinking that maybe we should expand one of the things that we've been talking about in greater detail, or maybe some independent aspect that we should do. You know, if anyone has any ideas.
I'd really be interested in the interlink between some of the the commercial streaming companies like Zoom and GoToMeeting and stuff like that, and the kind of direct link that other companies like Nevion or Degero, Highvision, AviWest, Streambox, etc., LiveU, TVU, those kind of guys. We deal with a lot of them in the ENG world, especially with the cellular bonded stuff. Some of them have hardware, some of them have software, some of them have a hybrid of both. And I know that they try to have kind of an interconnectivity with other platforms. So where both, file access and file sharing and file revision kind of stuff is important for a lot of clients. Also, video, like live video clip access and, pre and post production for that type of stuff, and how they kind of can interact.
Yeah, there were a couple of slides that we took out that talked about a little bit about you, instead of software client to software client, hardware client to hardware client, and how that mixed into existing SDI infrastructure. We could talk a little about that, but we're also maybe we could talk about some of the things that bridge the quality, because I'm looking at you, I'm watching you on my iMac and its camera. There's a lot of very interesting hardware to get better quality images into the equipment, and also recording the output of the equipment. Maybe not quite the level that you're talking about, Avery, but it's, the Blackmagic products that Marty mentioned is the ATEM Pro, which has the ability to directly stream from the switcher to YouTube and Facebook, but they can also plug into the computer and provide you with a switcher directly into Zoom. So you can switch between sources and feed that into Zoom. So we had some slides for that, but it seemed to be maybe a different presentation or another presentation.
Yep.
If you look at the meeting announcement, both me and Matt's emails are listed on there. And send us emails and we'll think about it. We'll sort of think, okay, maybe we should do that. And the other thing is we know other people in this business. Maybe we should invite them for a meeting.
Yep.
And
sounds good. Yeah.
Very good. And let me remind you of the November 18th meeting with on SMPTE ST2110 with Hitachi. And you'll be getting email notice if you're on our list. If you're not on our list, please let us know. And our section email is SMPTE-ne.org. And things will go up there as quickly as we have them. Right, Bob?
oh,
Bob's our webmaster.
It'll go up on our webmaster, and if you have Facebook, we have a Facebook page, and that's
right.
that way you sort of
Which
get
you
the
can get
automatic
to from our website.
And if you join the email list, Paul Beck will send you a PDF announcement that you can like post in a hallway or something like that.
Post in the hallway. So they have little tags that you rip off with the phone number or the email on it or something.
Yeah, you can get discount painting if you want.
Well, thank you all for coming. This is a nice format for a number of reasons. You don't have to get in your car. You don't have to burn gas, and you can be 1,000 miles away or more than that. So, and we can have presenters from a distance as well. So
Yeah,
this has a lot of potential.
yeah.
And
Just thank
thank you,
everybody
Bob and Matt.
Thanks for coming, and thanks for all the input, because I think that's one of the most valuable things about this is discovering companies, products, ways of doing things.
Not a good format for a barbecue, though.
Mm.
Or clam chowder.
Yeah.
You have to bring your own chowder. We'll get you Simpty cups, and you can sip your chowder while you're watching this. Well, I think we'll eventually be back in venues eventually, but we can do this at the same time, which is we can project this on a big screen or have it on a big display. A lot of things we can do.
Yeah, I think this is a good model for the future. I mean, we can tell the people we'll post their videos somewhere. We'll post their PDFs where they can sort of put their graphics. I like this video a lot. I like this format a lot. I think this has a future.
Anyone want the last word? Well, thanks again. It's good to see all of you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Yeah.
Good night.
All right, now.
Have a good night.
Good night. Thank you, David.
Bye. Let's see. Okay, I'm stopping recording now.